Dutton, you there?
Yeah.
What the hell are we doing today? Who are we? I haven't got a clue what we're doing. I don't even know what show this is. What show is it?
Is it? I think isn't it something about beekeeping?
Beekeeping? That's not going to work. That's going
Are
to
we
have
not
to
the
be.
new hosts of Robot Wars?
That would be awesome. I reckon we should be on Top Gear. Maybe we should be the host of Top Gear.
You might be a big enough tosser to be on Top Gear, but I'm not.
I'd be an epic tosser. There's a ginger tosser doing it now. What's the difference?
True.
Done. This is waxing lyrical with Mains and Dutt. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Do you remember that?
I remember
From a long
it well.
time ago. It's been reincarnated, brought back from the dead. It will be split into NFL and non-NFL, and this week it's NFL. So hello and welcome back. And for those who are going, yeah, Waxing Lyrical's back, and then you go, oh, it's NFL. Don't worry, we will actually do a non-NFL related one in the near future.
Talking about all manner of rubbish.
Which is what we're good at.
Yep.
But this week, NFL. We've moved here because obviously we've changed providers, so to speak. We've changed gas and electricity suppliers, so to speak, and we're on our own for the time being.
Indeed. We could be boiling our water while we're looking after our daughter, while Hive is sorting our heating at home.
Correct, mate. Absolutely correct. This week, we're going to talk some NFL news. Dutton does a spectacular interview with Jeff Reinbold of NFL, and one of our favourite guys on the TV. And then we're going to talk about the Super Bowl, obviously, which is on Sunday. And Dutton is going to give you 5 reasons why the Denver Broncos are going to win the Super Bowl. I'm not sure how he's going to do that, unless he says Wade Phillips 5 times. And I'm going to give you 5 reasons why the Carolina Panthers are going to win the Super Bowl.
Can I ask you to say the word spoiler alert before you say things like that?
Spoiler alert. Oh, before. Sorry. Anyway, Dutton, less of that. Let's get on with the show. News, and the main news non-Super Bowl related, I think, is Megatron Calvin Johnson deciding that he is going to retire, or putting out feelers to retire, or telling the Lions he's going to retire. I suppose there's a few questions relating to it. Do you believe that Megatron will actually retire and won't play next season?
Well, the interesting thing is that when we all knew there was going to be a new front office in Detroit, the first thing that any of us, experts, amateur capologists, people who just talk rubbish like myself, the first thing we all said was Megatron is not going to be playing in Detroit on that salary. So straight away it was going to be they're going to have to restructure him or he's going to have to take a pay cut. Whereas now the narrative is they may offer him a new deal to get him to stay. So if he's not retiring, it's actually a very, very clever bit of business by him and his agent. But people close to him, and it's one of those, if you're that close to someone, you'd be that close to them because you trust them with what you say. You don't trust them to go off on telly and Rappaport. But people have saying, people who are close to him have said, look, football isn't his life. And, well, to be fair, if I could make as much money doing something that was of secondary importance to me as Megatron has, then I'd probably call it quits at 30 as well. But Detroit do have previous of stud players bowing out still in their prime, do they not?
They do, obviously. The legendary Barry Sanders, who Dutton's talking about, who also retired at 30, I believe. I just look and I think, if you go back, and obviously you just look at the statistics or whatever, that's fine, but if you actually look at the injury history of Megatron, he's played a lot of games, but he's been on the injury report for possibly 15, 20 different ailments on 10 different parts of his body. That takes its toll, and as you said, he came in the league at the right time. He was a high draft pick. He obviously got a good rookie contract. He kind of just, because he had a good rookie contract, well, you've got to give him more in his second contract, got that again, so he doesn't need it for the money. So I can understand why, and let's be honest, they're not any closer to winning in Detroit. So do you take a year off, or even, you either take forever off, fine, off you go. Do you take a year off, then come back with an actual good team?
It's one of those, I think this isn't someone saying, I've fallen out of love with the game, I need some time away from it. This is someone who said, no, I'm done. I've played football for as long as I want to. So you'd argue if he does call it quits now, he's probably not going to spend the next year staying ready. So that means this time next year, he's got a whole year of catching up to do. He goes to another team, he's got to learn a playbook. And you'd say at 31, how hungry is he going to be to do it? But as you say, I mean, Detroit aren't going to... I mean, they finished well the season, but they're not going to win the Super Bowl next year with or without Megatron. So it's a question of, well, how much do you want to push him and possibly piss him off to the extent that he says, no, I was 50-50, but now get out my face. I don't want to play at all.
If he never plays another snap in 5 years, will Calvin Johnson be a Hall of Fame wide receiver?
The numbers would say yes, but he's done that which most wide receivers don't, especially the productive ones. He's kept his mouth shut for 9 years. I mean, I think he was wired up for sound effects once, and he said, "You boys have picked the wrong player to mic up. I don't say anything." And literally that week, I think for a 20-minute show, they probably got 10 minutes of stuff that he could say, because he literally lets his play do the talking. There's going to be a lot of wide receivers, because of the way the game is. And the question I always says, was he the best at his position for a consistent period of time? Arguably, yes. Did he ever win anything? No. But he had 1,964 receiving yards in one season. That's an NFL record. He's a lot of touchdowns. He's probably going to get in, but put it this way, if this was a calculated move to get in the Hall of Fame, he's going to have a few years jump on a lot of these other people. So if he's 5 years, it's probably going to be 7 years to Larry Fitz, that type. So if he does want to get in, he's got a good jump. But he'll be a toss-up one for me.
I think he's a Hall of Fame player, and when you're the best player in your position for 5 years, regardless of whether your team is any good or not, I think that gives you a good chance to be a Hall of Fame player. Done on our previous show, the MDDF, we talked a lot about the Cleveland Browns, whether we liked it or not, and talked especially about Jonathan Manziel. It looks like he's done in Cleveland, and it's Hugh Jackson's first stamp on the team, I guess. From a Cleveland perspective, do you now expect them to take, before we look at Manziel, do you now expect Cleveland to take a quarterback at 2?
Well, yes, but I think the advantage they have is that they don't have the pressure of throwing a quarterback straight in, because Josh McCown has shown he can be a bridge. I mean, I know McCown's getting on in age, but he wasn't the worst thing about Cleveland last year. So if they do take someone like Jared Goff, Carson Wentz, is it Paxton Lynch? I get Paxton and Braxton mixed up. They can come in and they can do what teams always say. He won't start. He'll sit behind the veteran, and then he'll be starting by week 8. But Hugh Jackson's creative enough on offense that if he did take a quarterback and did have to start him in week 1, he could probably do things around him and not make him the focus of the offense till he's ready. The best thing about the whole Manziel thing is that the wonderfully named Sashi, the chief executive who's responsible for player personnel on a Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, and the others do it the other days of the week, said that John Manziel has continually taken part in activities that have undermined the integrity of the Cleveland Browns. You're the worst sporting franchise in the last 16, 17 years, but Manziel has destroyed your integrity. That's impressive.
It is impressive, and it's probably true. I guess there's two ways of thinking about it from a Johnny Manziel point of view. There probably wasn't a worse franchise to go to. So he's out of it. The guy, in my opinion, has got an issue or multiple issues which need to be dealt with. I wonder why the NFL hasn't stepped in. Okay, maybe he hasn't failed a test or whatever, but maybe he needs to fail a test. Maybe he needs to miss some games. Maybe he needs to have a season. And much like a Josh Gordon, to understand you're doing something wrong here and you shouldn't be doing it anymore. And I don't think at the moment he's fully aware. He doesn't think he's got a problem, I guess is the best way to describe it, because if he thought he had a problem, he would do something about it. And him going to rehab was not him saying he had a problem. That was just people telling him to do that, and he went. The other situation is, I wonder what Johnny Manziel would be like in 1992 instead of 2016. I use an example of, I believe Brett Favre once was quoted as saying, "I'm going to drink Atlanta dry," and that's why the Falcons got rid of him. But that would have been the biggest story ever in the history of the NFL at the time, even though he wasn't playing. But because it was 1992, no one talked about it. So the problem for Manziel is there's no privacy, and he doesn't try and hide himself either. So I'm not looking to say, "Oh, I feel sorry for him." I'm just saying he's picked a bad time and a bad situation to have these kind of issues.
Damashek pointed out as well, probably the weirdest and worst thing about Manziel is, why do his friends feel compelled to video everything? Put your phones away. Just enjoy each other's company. For Christ's sake, stop taping things. It doesn't need to go on Instagram. No, don't tweet that picture. Get off Facebook. Talk to each other.
Yeah, and they're more interested in how many people are going to retweet it than actually what's going on in that situation.
Yeah. I mean, the idea that some people's social media accounts at End Up in 13 are so important to them that they have to do everything possible to spread their brand.
That is absolutely true from Main G7. Final news story, Dutton, before we get on to the Jeff interview, and that's a strange news item that came up today. The stories have indicated that regardless of what happens on Sunday, a team from LA, the Rams, would look to try and get Peyton Manning to play 1 year. Initial thoughts?
Well, the discussion is that they've had internal discussions. If my quarterbacks were Nick Foles and Case Keenum, I'd be having internal discussions about every quarterback from A to Z who's played in the last 15 years. Peyton Manning has said he'll never play in the NFC because he still wants to keep the Peyton v. Eli Super Bowl dream alive. But seriously, you've been bad this year. Jeff Fisher's offense is where quarterbacks go to die. Go out on your own terms, Peyton, for Christ's sake. I
know Peyton Manning is what's the best way to describe it? Media whore, yeah. But he's done that from Indianapolis and Denver. He doesn't necessarily need to be in LA to do that. As you said, I understand from the Rams' point of view, I nearly call them St. Louis, and the Rams' point of view why they would look to do it, because they don't have a quarterback. So, and even one with no arm who's 750 is better than anyone you've got at the moment. But it doesn't make any sense to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, I was under the impression that Peyton Manning had put a restraining order against Adam Rank and Dave Damashek, so they weren't allowed in the same state. So does that mean that if Peyton moved to LA, Adam and Dave would have to leave and probably move to Boston and Chicago, or Pittsburgh, obviously?
It's blatant publicity hunting by a team that has already dominated the off-season chatter by moving. You don't need more publicity. Suck it up. You want some publicity, fire your coach. Other than that, shut up and get on with it.
They're never going to fire the coach. He's there ad infinitum. So that's the news. So let's get on to your interview with Jeff Reinbold. Do you want to set it up? And we'll move straight into it.
Well, Jeff, as we know, has been on Sky for many years, and he usually does the playoffs. He's also a special teams coordinator in Canada, in the Canadian Football League. So I wanted to get his thoughts on special teams coordinators. I mean, how hard? I mean, people say he's a bad special teams coach. Well, how hard is it to coach it, right? He's going to kick it very far, you run after it. But also I wanted his opinion on the Super Bowl, and especially one coach taking part in the game in particular.
Right, well, there we go. Here's Dutton's interview with Jeff Reinbold.
Delighted now to be joined by Jeff Reinbold, who is the special teams coordinator of the Hamilton Tiger Cats, but better known to viewers of Sky Sport in the UK for his help on there with Kevin Cadle and Neil Reynolds. Coach, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure, really, my pleasure.
We were lucky enough a few weeks ago to speak to Kevin Cadle, so obviously we're working our way through you all. You know, we'll get you all eventually. The
first question I'd like to ask, Coach, is someone did actually ask me, and I couldn't answer it because I like to think I'm a smart ass and know everything, and occasionally I'm disappointed. Say you're a special teams coordinator in the Canadian Football League. On offense and defense, obviously there's different schemes, different systems. How different is it? I mean, how many different ways can you coach special teams? That's always, I think that's quite an interesting thing. I'd like to know.
Well, I tell you, it's in our game. It's really different because of the fact that the field is so much bigger. Our field is 13 yards wider than an NFL field, and it's actually the end zones are, instead of 10 yards deep, they're 20 yards deep, and then we have an extra 10 yards of vertical position on the field. So we actually have a 55-yard line. So you combine all of that, which means there are no touchbacks. They kick off from the 35. The guys that are kicking it 8 yards deeper in the end zone in the NFL, that ball's coming down at about 3 in our league. So obviously the return game is a much, much bigger part of the game. And then in the punt game, you cannot fair catch a ball up here. So every punt is returned. And if you punt the ball out of bounds between the 20s, it's a 15-yard penalty. So it really keeps the ball in play, and it makes the return game a much, much bigger part of the game.
I didn't know that they had that penalty for punts, because obviously the NFL, we have that, they have that on kickoffs, if it goes out of bounds, but I didn't realise they had it on punts.
Yeah, so for example, if your guy shanks one and it goes 30 yards and it goes out of bounds, and then you add a 15-yard penalty on top of it, you get a 15-yard net. And then, we have a way of scoring up here that's called a rouge point, which is if, for example, you punt a ball into the end zone and the returner can't get it out of his own end zone, then you get a point for that. So, for example, we're punting from our 40-yard line. The punter hits a 50-yard punt. It lands. The returner catches it 10 yards deep in his end zone, and we tackle him inside the end zone. We get a point for that. So it's a much, much more interesting game from a kicking standpoint because, what's happening in the NFL anymore is those guys kick the ball so high that you'll see maybe 2 or 3 punts returned a game. And in our game, it's completely different. There's 12 or 15 returned every game.
I mean, obviously, maybe one of the reasons the NFL has that the emphasis on player safety, with the kickoff being the length being changed, it going out of bounds, are there many injuries incurred in the CFL because of this, or is it not especially different from any other play?
No, Neil, we really don't see. I've always wondered about that the injuries on kickoff returns. I don't remember seeing that being a big. When I was, working with the guys in Kansas City, I don't remember that being a big thing. I just think it's something that they're trying to take as much of those collisions out of the game as possible. But again, I think you lose a bit of the game, frankly, when you can have a specialist kickoff guy, and every time you go out to kick off, he hits it 10 yards deep in the end zone. I mean, watch the Denver game. I don't think there was a kickoff returned in the Denver game because of the altitude and the fact that those guys were just such good kickoff guys.
I think I remember Coach Dick Vermeil, someone you're obviously familiar with. He did speak once that saying, the rules they have with practice nowadays, they're so limited in practice, especially how much hitting they can do. Maybe that's affected like the muscle memory and the capacity of the human body to recover from the type of hits that 10, 15 years ago wouldn't have caused injuries.
Well, I think there's a couple factors that why we see so many guys on the injury list today. Number one, the medical people are so much better than they were 10, 15, 20 years ago, certainly. So there's much better treatment for the players, and the league has taken a really aggressive stance on particularly head injuries, that every time, back in our day when we played, if you got hit in the head or you had a concussion, they just ask you how many fingers you had up, and if you could guess the right number, they put you back in the game. those days are gone, and now if a player gets a big concussion or a big hit, and particularly around his head, first thing they do is take his helmet away. So I think that league has done an outstanding job and continues to work hard to make the game as safe as it can possibly be for players.
You were obviously involved with NFL Europe from both the coaching and you were involved in the player development side of it as well. Mm-hmm. Since NFL Europe left us, do you think that basically NFL Europe might have ended at the wrong time, given the growth of popularity in the NFL? It seems, especially since the first Wembley game in 2007, where the NFL Europe ended a year earlier.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that are really, when you look back on that, in some ways we were ahead of our time. At one point we had 32 international players on practice rosters in the NFL. One of our products, one of the kids that came through our program, Sebastian Vollmer, is starting tackle at New England now. We've got Bjorn Vorner was a young kid that we had identified as a potential player, as a young player, and he was first round draft choice of the Indianapolis Colts. So there are guys starting to play now, and it's really a shame, because if you look at one of the successes that you could claim from NFL Europe was the development of the international players, and now we're having to do it in a different fashion, but you still have now Jack Crawford, you got Menelik Watson, you got Graham Gano, you've got a number of guys playing in the league right now that are European-born players, and I think that trend's going to continue because the game is more popular and there are more kids playing.
I mean, Andrew Brandt, who was the general manager, was in Barcelona at the time. He said that one of the first games they had, the Dragons scored a touchdown, the crowd didn't do anything, they kicked an extra point, and then they went absolutely balmy. I mean, obviously that, might have affected people's judgment, especially in America, of what our fans think in Europe about it.
It's amazing. Neil and I went on the road and took the podcast on the road this past couple weeks, and when you really get with the people and you talk to the people, you really have a sense of just how far this game has come. And there's a core group of fans that have been, particularly in the UK, have been core fans since the 80s. But there's also a younger generation of fans that, whether it's Madden, whether it's the fact that there's more football on TV now, or the internet has shrunk the world and information's so much easier to get, but they're much more sophisticated in their appreciation of the game. They understand the strategies of the game. They know the players in the game. They appreciate the rivalries of the history of the game. So all those things are positives, and I think that Alistair Kirkwood and those guys in the NFL UK office are the ones that really need to take the bows when it comes to this, because they've fought long and hard to, initially just to keep the London office open, and now it's become the head of NFL International. So, again, I think it's a credit to everything that those guys have done.
See, I was in New York a few years ago, and I obviously have that thing that helps me in America. I've got an English accent, so everyone wants to talk to me anyway. But when you're in a bar full of Pittsburgh Steelers fans and you're telling them about blitzing and not blitzing and whatnot in an English accent, I didn't pay for a drink all night.
You had a pretty good skin.
Oh yeah.
But you know what? It's interesting. When having the perspective of being over here when those first Wembley games were announced, and there was really a sense of, in some cases, disbelief. Other people laughed about it. Others said, what are we taking our game over there for? But now I think there is an appreciation here in the States that the fans in the UK do love the game and they do support the game. When you sell out those games as fast as those games are sold out, that's just, again, an eye-opener for everybody that's involved in pro football to recognize that the fans are rabid and continue to want more football.
Just one question on going back to player development. Are you in favour of some kind of development league or development academy? Some kind of camps to try and develop players not getting regular games on a Sunday?
Well, I think there's going to be another. The league is going to have to look at that, because particularly when you talk about quarterback development, there's no place for these kids to play. And, you've got 32 starters in the league, but, you can see that you need more than that. You need more depth than that. And so those guys need opportunities to play. So my understanding is, and my conversations with the guys in New York have been that the league is looking at alternatives now, whether that's another, putting together another league, putting together academies, how they're going to do it. But they know that they have to get more players playing because, the nature of the business is it's a game of attrition. You lose players along the way, and you have to be able to replenish that supply. And it's something that, again, it's really a shame because we had a great developmental league going, and just couldn't keep it going. And again, I think they're going to have to go back and revisit. Whether it's taking it to Europe, taking it to Florida, putting it in Arizona, someplace, they're going to have to find a way to get more kids playing the game just as a bridge between college and the NFL. Because the reality of it is there are more kids who can play in the NFL than do play in the NFL, and it's because they just don't have opportunities.
Obviously, this season, 2015, is pretty much over. There's just the small match with the Super Bowl still to be played. Based on what you saw last Sunday, could you make the argument that the most important person on either of these two teams is Wade Phillips?
Yeah, I can, because I know what a great coach he is. Actually, Wade and I are in the process of writing a book together on the 3-4, and I've known Wade since he was the defensive coordinator for Buddy Ryan in Philadelphia in the early '80s, and he is a phenomenal football coach. And you look at his track record and all the things he's done and the great players he's coached, and he's had success at every place he's ever been. I thought what he did on defense against New England was maybe the best defensive performance I've ever seen by a football team. Now, again, when I say that, I say it because that was a good offense that they just completely shut down. And, one of the top quarterbacks in the history of the game, and they were healthy, and, they'd gotten most of their offensive linemen back and all that. And they just completely, you hit him more times than any quarterback has been hit all year. He was, Brady is a tremendous competitor and a great preparation guy. He's a preparation junkie, and Wade had him fooled. The ball that Miller picked off, he had no idea Miller was going to drop, and he admitted after the game that he didn't know where the rush was coming from. There was just so many sophisticated looks and coverages that they hadn't shown, and I just thought it was a phenomenal coaching job by Wade.
Because obviously he's been up against like the quintessential field general in Tom Brady. Probably the greatest quarterback of all time. Although I know a few Jets fans who would like to argue the other way. He's going up now against probably a unique quarterback talent in Cam Newton. If you had, as I say, you're slightly biased because he's your writing partner. But if you had to bet that there'd be one defensive mind who could work out a way to slow down, if not stop Cam, it would be Coach Phillips.
I agree with you, and I think the fact that he has 2 weeks to prepare is really a plus for Denver. To be real honest with you, I think that's Denver's only hope, because Carolina is very good on defense too, and they play great special teams. So 2/3 of the game, you got to say that they're outstanding. Now, how he's going to find a way to neutralize Cam Newton, that's going to be, I think, that's what I'm looking forward to watching, is just what he does to try and neutralize what Cam can do, because Cam he's special. There aren't very many guys in the league at his size and speed. Most of those kind of guys are playing defensive end or tight end, and shoot, he's a quarterback. He's a beast.
See, one of my colleagues did actually say that surely we saw that Rob Gronkowski still had a good game against Denver. Someone said the only person in the league who surely can cover Gronk is Cam Newton.
That may be the case. And because he just, you can say, well, I'm going to put a spy on him. Well, if you use a defensive lineman, he's going to outrun him, and if you use a defensive back or a linebacker, he might run him over. So he's just a rare kid, and he's a tremendous competitor. And if you know his history, he went to the University of Florida for 1 year and then left and went to junior college and won a national championship in junior college and just dominated the game. Then he went to Auburn and put the team on his back his senior year and won a national championship at Auburn. And now he's doing the same thing in Carolina. So I wouldn't bet against him.
So I'll put you on the spot because I like making it uncomfortable for people when they've given up the time to speak to me. It's very gracious of me. How do you see it going on a week Sunday?
I think that, like I said, I think Denver's defense will keep them in it. I think what will happen is Manning will make a couple mistakes. They'll have two short fields, whether it's an interception or a fumble or some kind of turnover. Because again, Carolina is just a turnover machine. They find ways to get led the league in interceptions. They just are phenomenal on defense, turning the ball over. They get a couple short fields and they'll win the game 24-10, 24-7 or 24-10. Because I just don't think Denver is good enough offensively to move the ball consistently well against Carolina's defense.
My last question then, as we said, you're currently a special teams coach. We've talked about Wade Phillips. We've hinted at the Carolina defense itself, which is coached by Sean McDermott. There were 7 head coaching hires this off-season so far, and they were all offensive coaches. Is that it now? If you're a defence or special teams coach, you're just going to be a coordinator, and that's all you're going to be.
I think the trend right now, and NFL football goes in trends. There's you talk about the fact that it's all offensive coaches getting hired, but there's still a number of defensive guys that are out there that are going to get opportunities. This year was a different year, and a lot of it had to do with the fact that owners, particularly, were looking for guys that could help unlock their quarterback. The Giants, they have a quarterback who's won Super Bowls, and again, so you want an offensive guy around him. The Dolphins, again, have spent all that money on Tannehill, and they want to see what they can get done out of him, so they go hire a quarterback guy in Gaze. And I think that's the case in every one of those situations. San Francisco got so much negative publicity last year about the way they played on offense that they're trying to sell tickets, so they go out and hire an offensive guy who's, quote, an offensive genius. So it just runs in cycles, and I think this year it was, certainly a cycle for the offensive guys.
Well, Coach, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. I hope, I think I speak for the majority of fans in the UK, I hope you remain on our screens for a long time to come. So thank you very much for chatting to me.
I appreciate that. I enjoy going over there. The UK is like a second home to me, and when we have a chance to be in London and be on the TV, it really helps grow the game, I think, and that's really what makes my heart beat when we go around the country, see young kids playing the game and fans excited about coming to see games, and it's just been a real blessing, and I hope we can continue it for a long time.
Thanks very much, Coach.
All right, brother. Thank you.
Well, Dutton, that was Jeff Reinbold. Excellent interview, as always. You are really the master of those at the moment and seem to be able to pick them at any moment when I'm not available.
Yep. It's almost like I do it deliberately.
It's almost like you do it deliberately. It's weird that coincidence, I assume. So, Dutton, let's get down to the main course. It's the Super Bowl. So it is. I don't know if you've heard. I just speaking of, don't know if you heard. Have you listened to Monday's Gridiron podcast yet?
No, not yet.
Okay, when you do, make sure you tweet Ollie and Will and find out how many drinks they had before the show started. As the first possibly 15 minutes is them two and Matthew just laughing constantly about nothing. So I hope it was wine, because I don't think that substance is legal in the state of California.
See, I'm gutted because that technically scuppers our long-standing plans to do a podcast pissed.
Yeah, they definitely moved ahead and already done that mode. Dutton, instead of just picking a game, looking at it from that kind of angle, you said to me this week you wanted to do it as you're going to give me reasons why the Denver Broncos would win, and I was going to give you reasons why the Carolina Panthers will win. Pick 5 each, so you go first. Why are the Denver Broncos going to win? Number 1.
The main reason why Denver are going to win is they have a defensive coordinator who's shown that he can scheme and plan for all different types of offenses. And that's Wade Phillips. He's been the Super Bowl before with Denver, and they got an absolute shoo-in. This was back in 1989.
I think it was 55-10.
But that's what Denver did in Super Bowls, and to be fair, I've done since. If there's anyone, I said if there's anyone who could game plan to stop Gronk, it would be Wade Phillips. Technically, he didn't stop Gronk, but the fact is he cut off his supply line and made it more imperative that Gronk came out to play, but no one else could. He's facing the top offense in the league. He's facing the league MVP. They've got to slow him down. They've got to stop him. Or they could just do what Rodney Harrison suggests and go out to hurt him. Yes, that's a lovely story, Rodney. Go away.
Reason 1 why the Carolina Panthers are going to win the game is because of the incumbent NFL MVP, Mr. Cam Newton, best dressed man in the business, who, I don't know if you heard, is athletic and black. Don't know if you were aware of that. Not that that's relevant to anything whatsoever. Been absolutely fantastic this year in terms of winning games, in terms of playing quarterback and entertaining people, which I was under the impression you are supposed to do in the NFL. 35 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, just under 400 yards, just under 4,000 yards. Obviously, that doesn't include all the rushes he does. You know, the guy's done a lot this year for the Carolina Panthers. He is the Carolina Panthers in theory, and I don't see any reason why he won't make the team go 18-1 with victory in Super Bowl 50.
I mean, Cam Newton has been absolutely wonderful to watch this season. It's like, I think it was Ross Tucker who said his car crash last year was Peter Parker getting bitten by the spider. It's turned a adequate young man into a superhero.
He's ran for 10 rushing touchdowns this year. And we all love the Tom Brady 4th and 1 sneak. But is the Cam Newton jumping over the line with one arm, overtaking as the most unstoppable player in the NFL?
Well, how do you stop it? Unless you've got Gronk at nose tackle, how do you stop it? He's too big.
Yeah, he is too big. He is too big. Done. What's number 2?
Number 2 is it's the experience off the field that this Denver coaching staff have. They've got a head coach who's been to the Super Bowl as a player and won it. Obviously, he didn't play that much of a big part. They've got Wade Phillips, as we say. They've got. I'm sure I'm forgetting someone else here. This team have been. There's a wealth of experience that have been to this occasion before. I just think they've got more nous and more ability to shut out everything else that's going on than maybe Carolina have. Even though, Carolina obviously have got, I don't know if you've noticed, but they have a coach whose surname is shared by a coach who took a team undefeated to the Super Bowl, but he hasn't done it himself. And obviously Ron Rivera has played in a Super Bowl and won it himself. But I just think this is a more battle-tested unit off the field than Carolina's. So if it comes down to, the closer the game is, maybe it comes down to that decision that you have to make or don't make. And maybe Kubiak does have the edge over Rivera.
That I suppose I understand the concept, but I suppose that gives us the impression that we think that Gary Kubiak is an excellent head coach, which I suppose he took a team to the Super Bowl, but the last person who took a team to the Super Bowl in Denver got pretty much ceremoniously binned a year later.
Let's ask Mike Shanahan how good a coach Gary Kubiak is to have around.
Touche. I guess my one is also. Second one is also from the management, and it's consistent manager and message from the Carolina Panthers. It would have been very easy 2 years ago to fire everyone, Gettleman, Rivera, Shula, the lot, get them all out because you don't know what they're doing. But they allowed them to continue on message, allow them to continue doing the right things, continue to pick their players, and they are reaping the rewards this season. I think that kind of consistent management and message has allowed that team to be what that team needs to be in terms of how they feel, how they act, how they look. It makes them feel confident to be able to be themselves, where sometimes a first year head coach, you've not got that thing. I know Peyton Manning hasn't been fit this year, or isn't fit, or is past it, or whatever, but there was also that, is he working with Gary Kubiak? Does he understand the offense? Not does he understand the offense, is the offense right for him? Okay, it worked fine on defense, but it hasn't worked all season on offense. I don't see that from Carolina with Mike Shula. It's 5 years down the line, and they all know what the plan is and what they're supposed to do. And in fact, even though they've got no wide receivers, they're still scoring 500 points in the season. Do you know that kind of idea? They all know what Rivera does. They all understand what he's going to do, and I think that's going to be perfect for them going into the Super Bowl.
Well, another one is, it's Denver's ability to get pressure on a quarterback without a pass rush. I'm not saying they don't have one, because obviously they've got Von Miller and DeMarcus Ware, but against the Patriots, I think more often than not they only rushed 3, and that was Derek Wolfe, Malik Jackson, and this is how much no names are. I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name. But then, if you can create the amount of pressure, let's be honest, he's had a good season, but Michael Oher has been forced out of 2 teams for a bloody good reason. He's not very good at football. Excellent, protagonist in a novel or a docu-novel, or whatever you call it. If they can get pressure on Cam Newton, which he hasn't had to deal with because the O-line have kept him clean, which is what a good O-line's supposed to do. If they can get pressure on Cam Newton without having to send Ware and Miller on every play, it's going to, you've got the possibility you're going to confuse Cam. What does he do? Does he take off himself? Does he try and force the ball? Then it's a way of slowing him down. But ultimately, can you stop Cam Newton? Probably not. But if you can hit him enough to slow him down, you might get a chance.
My third one is Greg Olsen. So let's look back at the end. So the Carolina Panthers picked him up for a 3rd round pick from the Chicago Bears. You're like, oh my god, failed by the Bears. Do you know what the Bears used that 3rd round pick to do? They traded with Denver to get Brandon Marshall.
Oh,
so it was not the worst trade in the world. Everyone would love a tight end like Greg Olsen, as did Minty Marvel's fantasy team this year. Point scoring masters, winners of nothing. They're playing the Denver linebackers and the Keep the Lead. As you said, they did okay against Gronk. They didn't stop him. And he got 116 yards, I think, but one of them was like a 45. Most of that was in the last play. One of them was a 45-yard Hail Mary, for God's sake. But I like the matchup of Olsen versus those linebackers in Talib, and I think if you're going to put a bet on, I'd have Greg Olsen to score a touchdown, as I think he will.
Denver have been for quite some time. I've had a weakness against tight ends. It goes back. It's one of those. Everyone knew that Oakland conceded touchdowns to tight ends like they were going out of fashion. Oakland have done it for years. Oakland and Arizona are teams that it's weirdly though. Denver are aware of tight ends because they use them, whereas Arizona don't use them and don't acknowledge they exist. So try not to stop them.
Yeah, true.
Special teams. So it comes down. I think. I generally think that the punter could be a very important weapon. Try and force them back. Try and make Cam go 94 yards. He's shown he can do it in rarefied air up in Denver. The boy Colquitt kept pinning the Patriots back. Obviously, the Carolina Panthers have got an excellent special team unit. They've got potential for a big return from Ted. Ted, I play for no one except Cam. Ginn, who we forget was a 1st round draft pick back in 2007. So you could
Bravo, Miami.
Don't get a quarterback, get a punt, get a kick returner. But to be fair, that's what the Vikings did. Again, it's as I say, Cam Newton has shown he can move the ball, but if he has to start every drive from inside his own 10-yard line, how much miracle juice has he got left?
It would be easy for my next one to be Thieves Avenue, if you had this new name for the Carolina Panthers secondary, but I'm going to go forward a group and look at the linebackers, namely namely Luke Kuechly and Thomas Davis, but also obviously Shaq Thompson. Kuechly and Davis especially, Peyton Manning cannot throw the ball more than, say, 15-20 yards. These guys are fantastic in coverage, especially Davis. That is an extra people in Peyton Manning's eye line, in his space where he's trying to throw the ball into those spaces where he can throw it, not because of the tight window, just because that's as far as his arm will allow him to throw it. Kuechly's had back-to-back pick sixes. I don't expect him to get a pick six again, but that ability for them to cover and also stop the run means I think Denver could be in for a very long day when it comes to moving the ball at all against the Panthers. Final one, Dutton, what's yours?
Well, I'll be honest, I'm running a bit shy, so I could either say Wade Phillips again, or I could just say romance. Peyton, go out on top and then piss off and make your Papa John adverts.
Would he make his Papa John advert, or would he just come in post-season like Joe Montana does?
I don't know. It's anyone who takes a bit of attention away from Papa John. He's a scary-looking mother.
He is. Final one for me, Dutton. I have actually got one, and that is the Carolina Panthers' advantage at rushing the ball. Obviously, they're playing the Denver defense. Denver defense is excellent, but I still think Jonathan Stewart, Cam Newton, Fozzie Whittaker, Mike Talbot will be able to run the ball enough to allow them to throw the ball as well. I expect that to be a way to get them moving on offense, and I expect that to be a major part of their offense, as it has been forever under Ron Rivera. So finally, Dutton, pick the game. Carolina Panthers favoured by 5.5. What's your pick?
I'm going to take the Panthers with the points and against the spread.
Yeah, I am also going to take the Carolina Panthers with the points against the spread. 5.5 does not seem enough for me. What I will say is, I don't know if maybe it's me as well, Dutton. It's either Denver really close or Carolina in a blowout. So don't be surprised if you see a similar scoreline to 2 years ago when Denver played Seattle.
The one prop bet that I have attacked in bold terms for myself, usually because there was two numbers in my stake, was is it over 5.5 sacks?
Yeah.
Making money. So over 5.5 sacks. Both teams obviously know each other's game. You know they're going to try and get after the quarterback. Each O-line has got to do their best to keep their quarterback clean. I don't think with these two defensive coaches, I mean, Wade Phillips, we've spoke to before, great deal of respect for him. Sean McDermott was brought up in the Jimmy Johnson school, so he's going to send blitzers through the A-gap. He's going to be relentless, because I don't know. He was defensive coordinator in 2010 when the Eagles beat the Colts and they battered the crap out of Manning. So obviously that was a while ago, but Manning against the blitz, he's been excellent against the blitz. He's still 39 and he's going to be trying to force it. So, and plus we've seen Manning adopt the Tony Romo, I'll just give myself up on this play. He can read the play quicker than most other quarterbacks. He also knows how to give up on them quicker. I think 7 or 8 sacks between these two teams, at least.
On a similar situation, if you think there's going to be loads of sacks, punts is over 8.5. I would expect it to be 9 punts at 20-27. Maybe do them both together. Make yourself a little bit of money.
Yeah, and send us some.
Yeah, we could do with it. Done. That is the return of Wax and Lyrical. But before we go, we wanted to thank everybody who listened to MDDF, who'd been involved in MDDF, who'd edited for MDDF, and the guests we'd had. So we look at Kevin Cadle, look at Wade Phillips, Dick Vermeil, all the ATM boys, Dan Hansis, Mark Sessler, Chris Westling, Marcus Grant, obviously, Adam Rank, Matt Harmon. I'm doing well here. I thought it'd stop at about 4. Can you name any more?
Sigmund Bloom, Matt Waldman, Chris Trapasso, Patrick Crawley, Jim Reinking, Mike Clay.
We have had a lot of guests on, and obviously our friend Tony Esposti and new lead writer for the Read Optional, our good friend Andy Symes, who's wondering why his team isn't in the Super Bowl. As is Tony, funnily enough.
Yeah. Oh, I've got a few more. David Tuchman, Neil Hornsby, the
PFF.
creative mind behind Javon Hay,
Ross Tucker,
Andrew Brandt, Jenny Vrentis,
yeah. And
Liz Loza.
We will be looking to get all these people on Waxing Lyrical, and then obviously for Waxing Lyrical, the non-NFL edition, we'll get some of we've got our favourite guests on. Obviously, what we can do, Dawn, is get one of our best friends, Charles Dagnall, to do both NFL and non-NFL.
Exactly. I knew we'd forgotten him.
I didn't. I just thought I'd save the best to last. He doesn't listen anyway, so it's not necessarily a problem.
Sorry, Daggers.
Dutton, this has been the Waxing Lyrical with Mains and Duts. Get used to it.